Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome from Evans Hall in New Haven, Connecticut. My name is Joanne Legler. I'm the Director of Admissions for the MBA for Executives program here at the Yale School of Management. I'm thrilled to be joined by three of our students today, and they're going to be able to introduce themselves and answer some of your questions a little bit later in our webinar. But I'm going to kick off our webinar. I'm going to then hand it over to our friend Eric Chambers from GMAT. And really the topic today is about testing. We're going to be talking about the executive assessment specifically and answering some of the questions that you might have. But we thought we would start our agenda today with a quick overview of the MBA for Executives program, a nice overview of the executive assessment, and then some Q&A with myself, our wonderful students, and then with Eric as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. And let's kick it off with a really simple question. What is the MBA for Executives, and how do we do it here specifically at the Yale School of Management? So just as a brief overview, our program takes place every other weekend. And of course, this is perfect because our students, of course, are full-time working professionals. So they come here to the School of Management every other Friday and Saturday, which is a pretty big lift for them, but it's a great opportunity for them to interact with one another, be here at the school, of course, sit in on great classes, hear from wonderful speakers, etc. Our program is 22 months in total. We think about it sort of as a 2-year program. And every other weekend, we talked about that structure already, but in addition, our students come here for 4 intensive weeks as well. We kick off our program every July with 2 weeks of orientation and residence for the first-year class. We then go into that every other weekend format. We complete the first year with a wonderful, unique opportunity for international study called Global Network Week. Our students then come back to kick off their second year with another residence week. We continue that every other format until the end of the program in May. Our students that are here with us today are almost there. I can probably see the finish line at this point, and graduation is just about 5 months away from now. To put it a slightly different way, what does that weekend look like? I'm definitely about to tell you how packed it is. So if you're looking at this sample class weekend and thinking, wow, we do cram a lot in, that's true. It's a pretty intensive weekend starting first thing on Friday mornings. So our students are here for classes. Perhaps they're taking the customer class as part of our integrated core curriculum. We do feed you, so you'll get both breakfast and lunch. A colloquium speaker may be on the agenda for a Friday afternoon, and that's specific to each student's area of focus. We'll talk a little bit about that too. We then go back into class for the afternoon, and then our programs office is terrific about coordinating a series of events for students to get to know Yale University a little bit better. So perhaps there may be a tour to the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, or perhaps a tour of the planetarium or the medical library, or to watch how the bells are rung in Harkness Tower. Great opportunity to really feel more part of the larger Yale University community and do a little tour around Yale. We're right back at it on Saturdays with class at 8 a.m. So it's good to go and get some sleep on Friday night. Of course, we'll feed you again, both breakfast and lunch. Another class will be held in the afternoon. And then there are optional workshops that this programs team curates for our students as well. And these are around things like executive voice and presence, which is a class or a workshop that's taught by a member of the faculty at the Yale School of Drama. This is really about finding your voice and thinking about how you come across to others and how you can improve your presence. It might be something about emotional intelligence. It might be an alumni speaker. While these are optional, they're almost always quote unquote sold out, as our students really try to take advantage of every opportunity they can throughout the weekend and throughout the program. Put a slightly different way, across the 2 years, we're always working on 2 things. One of those is your leadership development. Hopefully, as an executive MBA candidate, this is a thing you're constantly working on anyway, but we curate classes, speakers, and workshops throughout the 2 years that you're here to really identify and strengthen those areas that you're already pretty good at, as well as shore up any areas that might be a little bit weaker or not quite as strong for you. And that happens in a variety of ways throughout the 2 years. You're also always going to be required to attend a colloquium speaker series. The speaker series is curated by each faculty director in the area of focus, bringing in their friends and colleagues, other experts and leaders in the field. to tell you what it's like. What are the challenges? What are the great successes of being a leader in that space by area of focus? In between, of course, you're in class. The first year really is about being part of our integrated core curriculum, the same curriculum that our full-time MBA students are taking. And this is really about learning about organizational perspectives and thinking about different ways of considering a problem from a leadership level through seeing it through the lens of different perspectives, like your customers or your employees. We then send you off around the world on Global Network Week, an opportunity to connect for a week in a class that sounds really interesting to you or is perhaps being taught in a country that's somewhere you've always wanted to visit or learn more about. In the second year, you'll dive into your area of focus classes. So this is when you will separate from the larger group of 75 students in each of our cohorts into smaller groups of 20 to 25 based on your area of focus. You'll finish up your second year thinking about advanced management. How can you take what you've learned in our core curriculum and elevate your learning and experience in those spaces over the next few months? Students do work on a self-directed study as well, and that's our curriculum. We have some great webinars out there already, pre-recorded and on our website and YouTube channel that give a better overview of the program, that dive deeper into the areas of focus, both in general and specific to each area of focus, healthcare, asset management, and sustainability. So I highly encourage you, if this feels like too high level of an overview for you, to go back and watch those webinars as well, featuring sometimes some of our faculty directors, which is a great treat. Hopefully what you're learning from us over watching these videos, interacting with us here on campus or on the road, is that Yale SOM is made up of a community of purpose. These are folks who have a strong sense of purpose, connect deeply to our mission to educate leaders for business and society, and know that an enormous part of the benefit of doing an MBA program here at Yale SOM is being part of a community full of people who are engaged, who are leaders in their field, who are looking to you to become part of their network and vice versa, who are active in the classroom to both affirm and challenge some of your predisposed notions and are going to be lifelong friends. Eventually, when you graduate, you'll leave. You won't see each other quite as often anymore, but I promise you, you'll continue to stay in touch. These folks will now be your classmates, your colleagues, maybe even your business partners, but hopefully lifelong friends as well. Our class of 2021, who started this July, is 74 strong. They are just about finishing up their first semester with us. Seems like that went by pretty quickly. And the group is really quite diverse in terms of industries and experience. But as a profile, on average, our students are 37 years of age and have about 13 years of work experience. Additionally, 36% are women. That's a number we're always trying to increase. And 41% have already taken another master's program or other advanced degree prior to jumping into the EMBA program here at Yale SOM. And then finally, they are quite diverse in terms of citizenship and background as well. And this year's class represents 13 different citizenships across the group. Hopefully that all sounds good. Hopefully you've already learned a little bit about us already and you're eager to learn more about the admissions process. That's mostly what we'll talk about today. To give a quick overview of what the process is like, it's pretty straightforward. You have to submit an application by our round deadline. Talk to you more about that eventually as well. The admissions committee reviews all applications and then chooses to interview a subset of each applicant pool to come and interview with us here on campus with our staff, with our alumni, and with our faculty. The committee reviews each application again before making a final decision. We don't have a rolling admissions process, so instead, these are fixed and correlate to 3 different rounds of application. And that's pretty much the same year after year. So while our first round deadline has come and gone, if you are thinking about doing an MBA a little bit later, this is probably what it'll look like in terms of deadlines moving forward as well. On this slide, what you'll notice is what our requirements are for admission to the MBA program. Pretty standard. I don't think there are too many surprises here. If you haven't already opened an application, go ahead and open one. Get familiar with what the requirements are. We do have our second round deadline, January 30th of 2020. So if you're watching this in real time and thinking about applying for this year, your next opportunity to do so will be to submit an application by January 30th. And then our final deadline for the year to start in July 2020 will be at the end of March in 2020. Again, I think the components that we are looking for are, again, pretty obvious. Shouldn't be any big surprises here. But the one thing that we get a lot of questions about is the standardized testing opportunity. We take either the GMAT, GRE, or the executive assessment. And we're lucky enough today to have somebody from GMAT to come and speak to us a little bit more in depth about the executive assessment. So we're really excited to be able to offer you the opportunity to get to know this test, its components, and how to make your way through it in a little bit greater detail. So at this time, I'm going to ask our friend Eric Chambers, who's from GMAT, to join us and walk us through both the construction of the exam and give us some great tips about how to prep for the exam if this is new for you. Eric, are you with us?
So what I wanted to do is to kind of quickly, though, go through the executive assessment, give you sort of do this pretty quickly, and then obviously we can answer all your questions in the question and answer time. So, great. Joanne, if you could go to the next slide and go ahead and. All right. So I guess the key things here is that the executive assessment was specifically designed for the busy working professionals. And so a lot of the features that you're going to see will fit your schedule. So things like your ability to reschedule as often as you want without any fees, assuming that you do it within 24, 48 hours of your test time. That you can send your scores to as many schools as you want without additional fees. You can do that anytime. You can go ahead and plan that when you sign up for the test, or you can do it afterwards. So again, whatever is easier for you. And then the last, this is the type of exam where it's really focused on readiness. And so it's really not used so much as screening. It's really to help Joanne and her team figure out, just are you ready academically to handle the program? But it also provides you with the opportunity to know if you're ready for the program. And so, we call it light prep, which is 20 to 30 hours roughly. And if you go through our prep materials, which I'll show you, that's how long it would probably take you, which is just a perfect amount of time. And so if you're finding that difficult from a just hours standpoint, you'll start to, you just need to sort of question whether or not you were ready for an MBA program wherever you might be attending. So again, I will talk about some of these things about how it's adaptive and how you can review and edit. I'll show you this in just a second. The length is 90 minutes, only 40 questions. It includes 3 sections. I'll show you that. And then the total score, though, includes all 3 sections. So it's not, the Graduate Management Admission Council, where I work, also owns the GMAT. And in the total score there, it's the verbal and the quant combined. And then the integrated reasoning and analytical writing assessments are sub-scores that are also provided to schools. But again, with the executive assessment, all 3 sections are included in the total. Schools also get the sub-scores as well. You can see the scoring ranges. We do offer accommodations, so extra time on the exam or someone to read the questions to you, that sort of thing. There's an application process for that. You can find it on our website. We would ask that you go through that application process first to get confirmation that accommodations are appropriate for you. And then we will help you to schedule your appointment. So if you're needing extra time or double time, we need to schedule that with the test center. You can see the cost, but again, remember there's no rescheduling fees, and there's unlimited score sending as well. Now, one interesting thing here with the executive assessment is that you have a maximum of 2 times that you can take the exam. This does fit in with this sort of readiness model that we have. This when we worked with the MBA programs to develop this exam. That again, this is not the type of test that you just keep taking to try to get a higher score. Again, the schools are just trying to get a sense of where you are and how they can help get you ready for the program. Now, you can take the assessment in any of our partners test centers, 600 plus around the world. Same place where you could take the GMAT. So any place you can take the GMAT, you can take the executive. Last thing is that you would register by going to com/EA. So let's go to the next slide. And I'll just quickly show you, again, just a little bit more detail here. So you've got 3 sections. You've got the integrated reasoning section, again, 12 questions. You see that it has its own subscore. That's 30 minutes. Then you move right into the verbal reasoning. You have 14 questions there. Again, your own set of subscores. That's 30 minutes. And then you finish with the quantitative reasoning section, which is also 14 questions. Again, no breaks. You're in and out, 90 minutes. And, it's a very convenient exam to take. So but let me show you how it works. And so here, when we talk about it being section adaptive, we start off with 6 integrated reasoning questions that are more of the medium level. And then depending on how you route you to an easier set of 6 questions or a harder set of 6 questions. And so that's how we're adapting. Now, depending on how you do on that whole set of 12 questions, there is some correlation between those types of questions in verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. And so we can then route you to either an easier or harder set of verbal questions. How you do on those? We route you to an easier, medium, or harder. And then we do the whole thing again with the quantitative section. And so again, as you can see, this is how it's adapting to you, depending on how you're doing. And it just makes for a better testing experience and obviously provides very tools for them to be able to make the decisions they need to make. So, just kind of going on again, sort of briefly, we're not going into super detail everything on the executive assessment, but I do think this is important, which is what you should expect on test day, because I think some of the security measures that we have in place to ensure everybody is on the up and up, just want to be prepared for it. So, we know you're going to be maybe a little anxious when you come in, and so we don't want to, add to that. So again, as transparent as we can be about the security process. So they will have an ID reader there. So either that's a passport or driver's license, again, depending on where you are. So again, if you're a non-U.S. citizen and you're testing in the United States, you're going to need a passport. If you're if you're U.S. driver's license, and so they'll ensure that that's a proper ID. Make sure everything measures up there. They're going to take a digital picture of you. You're going to give a digital signature.
Okay, I'm afraid we might have lost Eric for a minute there. So I'll. Oh, great. Eric's back.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We lost you for a sec, but you were talking a little bit about what to expect on the test day, and the last thing you talked about was a digital signature.
All right. Okay. So the last couple of things there real quick, you're going to leave everything in a locker. So you don't take anything into the testing area with you. You don't take in pencil or paper. Definitely don't take your phone or anything of that. And again, the people that are working at these facilities will help you with all of that. You can just leave everything in your locker. And then we're going to give you a legal size laminated sort of notepad that you'll be able to use for your notes, and we'll also give you a left-hand friendly pen, which means it doesn't smear as you move from left to right if you're left-handed. Now, at the end of the exam, you're going to get your official results. They will also be sent to the school within a couple of hours, and you're all done. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. So if you're looking at that sort of January, it looks like a January 30th deadline or March 30th deadline. If you're taking the exam on that day or the day before, your results will get to you in time. So just the last thing I just wanted to talk about was really just the prep materials that are available. If you're interested, I think it's a nice little package. It's really all you need. We have some bundles and things like that. Now, there are free questions on gmac.com/EA. You can definitely check those out. Here's a nice package. Lots of questions, as well as a couple of full-length. You're taking, you're taking the EA. You're just taking it home, and will be scored. It's timed and all that kind of stuff. You're going to get sub-scores. You're going to see your total score, and that will be very, very close to what you're going to do when you actually go into the test center to take it, because obviously these are all, they're retired questions. Obviously we're using, but we know exactly how they score, and we obviously use the same algorithm for the scoring that you would have on the real exam. So that is the executive assessment, sort of awesome. In a short. All right.
Thanks so much, Eric. What a great overview of this exam, and hopefully that helped to quell any fears or anxieties that students might have about taking the test. And speaking of that, I was able to just post a blog post not too in the last few weeks. Take a look at that. I've talked a little bit about test anxiety, generally speaking, and what it means for our admissions office when we're thinking about how we think about the exam, your score on the exam, and how it fits into a holistic picture about admissions. So I encourage you to check that out on our website, our EMBA blog. Would love to know your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our students now. I am lucky enough to be joined by 3 of the students in the class of 2020. I'm going to let them take a minute to introduce themselves, and then we're going to turn it over to you as the audience. What questions might you have, either for me as the EA or other tests relate to the admissions experience for our students? Once they tell you a little bit about their experience, perhaps you might have some questions for them. Or if you have questions for Eric from the GMAT side of things in terms of how the test is considered or what they thought about when they were creating the exam, anything at all. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about some questions that you might have for us. In the meantime, I'm going to ask our students to introduce themselves by name, tell us where they're from, what they do right now, and then I'd love for each of you to talk about your test. Which one did you take? And then we'll get into some questions about your actual experience. But let's start with some intros. Banya, would you start for us?
Sure. So as Joanne just said, my name is Banya. I'm from New York City. I actually moved back to New York City about 6 months ago. I'm currently working for Accenture as a manager in the digital transformation area. I took the GRE and the executive assessment, so we can talk about those experiences a little later on.
Definitely. Megan.
I'm Megan Can. I also live in New York City. I am a nurse in the cardiac cath lab at NYU, and I took both the GMAT and the EA.
And Jonathan.
Perfect. Hello out there. Jonathan Camacho here. I reside in New York City. I'm from the Bronx, so my Bronx people out there, hello. I'm on the healthcare track right now at Yale SOM. I work for Johnson & Johnson Vision and the medical device side. I took practically every exam possible. So but the thing is, I took them in different intervals in my life, and I want to share that story with you because at every different point, I took a different exam. I had a different story as to why I didn't apply. But the EA made the most sense, and that's the relationship between getting into SOM as well. So I'm happy to share that experience.
I'll toss it back over to you. Tell us about your story. What do you want people to know about your story?
So I've been trying to get into business school for about 10 years, and I say that with very good intentions because when I was thinking about business school, I was thinking about a top-tier school. I knew where I wanted to go, but I just had so many life events happening. I was getting promoted. I was getting new responsibilities. Every time I took the exam, my manager would say, hey, listen, we got some new work for you that's exciting. And I just never saw the opportunity to put an application in. And as time passes, which you guys will see in life, those tests expire. And I took the GMAT 5 years later and found out that was expired. And I remember meeting Maria, who's one of the admission officers here at the Yale Club. I suggest you guys do put your resume in for a screening. I got an invite for a second look. And I remember having a great interview with her. She says, great, your next step is the GMAT. And I almost cried because at that point in my life, I was just not ready to sit down for 4 hours at night after a long day of work. And I said, absolutely not. You're not going to get an application from me. I'm sorry to waste your time. And at that point, she actually wrote back to me about a week later saying, hey, listen, we heard you loud and clear. We're going to be taking the executive assessment, and I want you to apply. And I felt a sense of relief. Why? Because the executive assessment is described as a little lighter than a GMAT, but it's so relevant to what working professionals are going through. You know, it examines exactly what you're going through in life in terms of just looking at the integrative reasoning, your verbal, your quant. You're not sitting there trying to put circles and cubes and measuring the distance. That's not real life right now, unless you're an engineer. But that was my experience, and I felt that was the nice way of saying to myself, I can do this. And I think the only barrier of me applying to business school was this standardized exam, and the EA was a nice gateway for the schools to really assess who I am and then get to really know who I am. And I think that was my journey to get there.
Megan and Banya, what did you think about in terms of hours needed to prep? Looking back on your experience, if you can remember how many hours and how much time did it feel like you had to? And then Jonathan, I'll be interested to hear your feedback on that as it relates to the GMAT. Maybe Banya, you can talk about that as it relates to the GRE. But timing-wise, what did you remember?
So I remember prior to October 2000, when did we start? What year are we in? 2017, we applied. I was not going to even come to business school. I was like, I'm so done with school. But after, really taking a hold of where I was in my career, I figured that was the right thing to do. So I like to be as prepared as possible. So I immediately went to prepare for the GRE, and I think I did a little overkill. I bought the GMAT book, I bought the GRE book. I was doing questions from both books because I was like, if I know how to answer each question, then I'll be more than prepared to kill the GMAT or the GRE whenever I'm ready to take it. I also hired a tutor, which was, again, more of the same, overkill. And I eventually settled on taking the GRE because I felt that I was stronger on the verbal side. I did actually put in a lot of hours preparing for the exam, but in hindsight, I can tell you that I put in way too much work for it. I ended up taking the GRE. I spoke with Maria as well after she assessed my resume, and she said, hey, you should take the executive assessment as well. I think it was the first year Yale was taking it. So I decided to take it, and I had taken all the GMAT questions, so I didn't really have to put that much time into preparing for the executive assessment because it wasn't about putting a square into a circle, as Jonathan just said. So I don't think it's anything that you have to worry yourself about. I think putting in 20 to 30 hours is more than enough time. I think that if you sit down and focus on it and just really focus on who you are and where you are in your life, that's more about what Yale's looking for. And I don't regret any of that.
How about you, Megan?
So I am somewhat similar to Banya, where I started studying for a different exam. When I decided to go to business school, I'd never heard of the executive assessment. So I studied for the GMAT, and I took a course, and I had a tutor, and I overkilled studying for that test. I spent way too much time, and by the time the test came, I was so nervous, and those 4 hours were not fun. And then I studied for it again, and it wasn't until I talked to the admissions department and Maria at Yale that she was like, you should look into taking the executive assessment. And I was sort of defeated at that point, so I think I had taken the test anxiety out of it. And when I went in, I was pleasantly surprised at the length of the test and that it was a much better testing experience for me, and I appreciated that, so thanks.
How about you, Jonathan? What do you remember timing-wise?
Yeah, I think the preparation time, I'm gonna echo the responses here. I just remember that it was the first year that the exam was released, so there wasn't a lot of information about the EA.
Yeah.
So we were taking just a lot of what kind of energy you have to put into this. So I think I came over prepared because I went in with the GMAT mentality, and the EA, honestly, after those 90 minutes, the world, and you're seeing rainbows and unicorns, and you're just like, this is great, it's over. But I would just say rigorous preparation is the Yale way regardless, but I would say the EA is a great channel for those working professionals who feel like they can't do that exam right now, the GMAT. I think that's the perfect exam for them to get that assessment out so they can apply to Yale.
Do you remember feeling like one section was particularly more difficult than the other? Did you breeze through one and sort of struggle through another? If you can remember back to a couple of years ago, what was tough? What felt a little bit less so?
I'm not quantitatively strong. If quantitative is not my favorite type of problem set, so going into those, I had more anxiety, and it definitely seemed like in my head, I did well on them, so again, I don't know, but it was definitely the quant section that was, I remember, to be more challenging.
Okay. You guys feel the same way?
I think integrative reasoning was a unique feature of I'm like, what is this? I really didn't know how to prepare for it. It was something just really new. I did double down on some of the work they had prepared for the GMAT, but I felt that was an area I just had no idea what was going to be assessed.
That was my favorite part.
It was the favorite part. See, my least favorite part. I knew what verbal and the quant would look like.
So for me, integrated reasoning as well, but it was really funny. While I was preparing for it, integrated reasoning was my worst score. But on the exam, it was my best score. So I didn't know how that works. But again, the length of the exam was perfect. 90 minutes.
Yeah.
90 minutes.
And I will say, you guys are sort of the guinea pig class. Certainly for SOM, the class of 2020 was the first where the EA was available for these guys to take their test in time to apply for the program. The EA had been piloted at a couple of different schools years before. So going back to that, gosh, you didn't know much about it. There wasn't a lot out there. Do you remember being able to take any practice exams? And if so, how did that go in comparison to the actual test?
I Googled everything possible, and there wasn't much out there. Like Manhattan Prep, which is like a major preparatory for like business schools, they kind of like shunned it for a little while, only to know that now they have programming behind it. So it was hit or miss. But I just knew if I was prepared for the GMAT that this would be something somehow I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I also understood that there weren't that many metrics out there.
That's
so
right.
that was an easy, like, way of just understanding that the wall of the barrier to, I'd say the baseline was very much not unclear. So I felt a lot of confidence in that. And as a pioneer of the EA, I take a lot of pride in making it hard for you guys.
I just remember, like, I couldn't find what a good score was, or like
It's a tough
what
one.
an accepting, like what schools accepted on the EA when I was applying. So I took it and I got a score, and I was like, I don't know if I did well or bad, so we're just gonna see how this rolls. And I almost think that worked to the advantage, because then I didn't have the anxiety towards it, and I didn't know, like, which now I think in upcoming years, well, that ignorance isn't available, but
It's true.
it was,
Yeah.
I think that works well for me. I don't know.
Great.
So for me, it was exact opposite of Jonathan. I was anxious because I didn't know what a good score was. I was like, wait, so if I get a 160, is that good? If I get a 170, is that good? Because there's so many metrics for the GMAT, and Yale is a top tier school, so they have to have a top. People are probably getting 200s. That's what I was thinking. And then it didn't help that Maria and the whole admissions office had taken the exam.
Yes.
So I didn't know if my score was better than theirs. So after I got my score, I called and I was like, hey, I took the executive assessment. I don't want to tell you my score. And I told them my score. So, oh, that's great. Perfect. Send it. And then, I was relieved. But I'm hoping that there are some more metrics for you guys to leverage. But I'd say don't really, I can say this now that I'm in, I guess. Don't worry about the scores. Just go out there and do your best, and everything else will take care of itself.
It's actually a great segue into a question we've gotten from the audience, which is, does the admissions team prefer the executive assessment versus anything else? I think it's tough for us to come out with, to say we prefer one over the other. However, I will say that the majority of students that are in the program, and the more and more people we talk to about this, it seems that this is a preference for our applicants, and I think that includes these three over here. The admissions team will be happy to take in any score that you have to offer, whether it's a GMAT, GRE, or the EA. I think if you're new to testing altogether, the EA is probably the way to go. On the other hand, if you've got a score out there from a past application or a test attempt with GMAT or GRE, we'll happily take your score. We'll happily give you an assessment too of whether or not we think that that's sort of in the ballpark for our program and our assessment of your ability to be successful in the classroom here at SOM, which is to kind of bring it all back. What it's all about. What we're looking for in the EA, the GMAT, or the GRE is to understand better your ability to be successful in the classroom and to be ready at the executive MBA level to be here and to do the work that's required of you. That in combination with your undergraduate or graduate transcripts, as well as your career, your letters of recommendation, it's an incredibly holistic process. And so not scoring a certain score that you think you sort of have in your head or not meeting a metric that you were sort of hoping that you would doesn't necessarily count you out for admission. We really do think of everything when we are reading and evaluating applications and meeting in our committee. A resume pre-assessment is a great way to get started. We'll happily talk to you about scores or tests at that time as well. But yeah, please remember that this is a really holistic process where we read and evaluate every piece of your application before coming to any determinations about an interview or eventually admissions as well. So hopefully that takes a little bit of the anxiety out of it. Going back to you guys to think about studying and preparing, somebody has asked, is studying for the GMAT or the EA, how did that help prepare you for the executive MBA? Do you see any correlations between prepping for the test and the application with being ready to be here as a student again if it's been a while?
Sure. So my mythology was an hour and a half in the morning and then an hour and a half before I went to bed. That was my prep for the EA. And I broke it up that way because I have a lot going on and I want to make sure I can focus. And 3 hours in a row, I will get nothing done. And I've been able to transplant some of that to the MBA program, where now because the workload's a little more. So now I do 2.5 hours in the morning and I do 2.5 hours potentially in the evening, depending on what's happening in my world. But that structure, you can definitely transplant in your MBA experience as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a strong relationship between how you study for this exam and how you also execute at the MBA level as well.
That's great. You guys agree?
Absolutely. I would say I'd echo that point. For me, it was a while actually answering anything academic. So even just getting into that mindset was really important. Understanding how to analyze a question as opposed to just trying to figure out the answer. It was about the bigger picture, and that's what this program is about the bigger picture. So, and echoing Jonathan's point, just even getting into the mold of sitting down and studying while working was really important, because you have to balance family life, you have to balance school life, and then you have to balance your work life. So this was a good practice run to see if I was even able to handle all three while being in school.
Mm-hmm. Megan, you agree?
I agree. I think it was it got me into the practice of knowing how to prioritize my time. I knew I had to study a certain amount or accomplish a certain amount of questions before I went out with my friends or before I went to an exercise class or something, and just knowing that starting to prioritize my time that way even before I got to the program was helpful, because when you get here and you're in the classrooms and you have the workload, it is a huge shift in your life, and it did help prepare, at least if you haven't been doing anything academic for a while. It was a nice sort of segue into the workload that we have.
Great. I'm going to turn it back over to Eric for a second. We have a slightly more technical question about the executive assessment and how it's scored. So Eric, if you're able to weigh in on this, we have a question asking a little bit about somebody taking the practice tests and whether or not getting every question correct would result in the perfect score of a 20. Instead, it might be closer to an 18. What is the maximum score possible both in a practice exam and the real thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is a hidden secret in some ways. So yeah, if you actually get on any of the subsections, it's actually going to be 18. So it's not 20. What we did was we kept some room on both ends of the scale. So, because again, this is still a relatively new exam. It's been out for roughly 4 years now, 3.5 years. And so the question is it too hard? Is it too easy? So allows us to adjust if we need to. So the lowest, of course, is a 2. But again, the highest right now is an 18.
Yep. And Eric, while we have you, one of the, we here at SOM are one of, I think, the earlier adopters of the EA. In general, as people are considering an executive MBA, would you say most schools are open to accepting that exam as part of the standardized test requirement at this point? Or what's the sort of over-under on that in terms of schools saying yes to the EA or hoping for a GMAT or GRE instead?
Yeah, so right now there are a little over 80 schools that accept the executive assessment worldwide. In the Americas, I think it's 55 schools at this point. It changes every day. It's very popular amongst the schools and amongst the candidates. It was really interesting to hear experience. We are seeing people that, again, it really was, we were working with to try to help solve a problem in that particular space, challenge that they had. And so, but it is become so popular that a lot of schools are starting to see the benefit for their part-time and even full-time and executive master's programs and things of that nature. So I would say for anybody that if they we should just be looking at Yale and be done with it, right? That's
Thanks, Eric. We lost your audio for a second there, but I heard you say, hopefully folks are looking at Yale and considering our program, so thanks for the plug. We have just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and hop over to a slide that allows you to write this down, take a screenshot of it. We are absolutely happy to answer any questions that you might have. So the emba.admissions@yale.edu email address will take you right into our inbox. That's a great opportunity to ask us any general questions that you have or anything specific to your application. If you haven't already, we of course would encourage you to still consider doing a resume pre-assessment, which allows you to submit a resume or a LinkedIn profile and get some feedback on your appropriateness, your fit for the program, your candidacy. That may result in a follow-up phone call. We would certainly encourage you to visit us here on campus, to sit in on class, meet our students, have lunch, understand what it's like to be back in the classroom and what the experience of the MBA for Executives is like here at SOM. And then here is the URL in case you're interested in learning more about the executive assessment. Go ahead and start to do some research if this is brand new for you. And if not, hopefully there's an opportunity there for you to learn a little bit more before you dive into taking the exam. If you haven't taken it yet, I wish you the best of luck. We'll go down the line with our students as we close out here. Any pieces of advice that you would give to our candidates out there, either about testing or since you guys have talked so in depth and so wonderfully about your experiences, anything in general that you would say to anybody who's considering an executive MBA, generally speaking, or this one here, what we have to offer at Yale specifically? I'm being super general here, but I'd love to hear if you either could talk to yourself 2.5, 3 years ago, or anybody out there who's thinking about delving into this. What would you say? I'll go down the line, start with Banye.
So I'd say make sure you enjoy the process. It's going to be a lot. Preparing is going to be stressful on your family if you have one. It's going to be stressful on you. But enjoy the process because it's going to allow you to test your limits, and it's going to allow you to see what you're capable of, even though you may not have thought you were capable of certain things. Mm-hmm. And I just also say, don't doubt yourself in this entire process. Make sure that you really believe that when you're applying to the school that you're going to get into the school. Leverage the network that you see us, and when you come and visit us, make sure you leverage these networks, and make sure you stay in touch with the admissions office. They're great, and I mean, Yale. That's all I have to say.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Megan, what do you think?
We'll do it. Just if you're thinking about an executive program, I would definitely look into one that you go on campus and you're with your classmates, because the relationships that I've made with my classmates and the experiences that I've had with them are invaluable, and it's just as important as the education that you get. And when I came to the campus for the first time and I met the admissions team and I met some of the students, I was blown away by, and just every stereotype I had about like an Ivy League school or coming to Yale was just shattered. And I think that it's important that if you're looking into programs, that you visit the school, and that when you're there, go to a program where you're physically on campus and in classrooms, because it's so important and it's life-changing.
Thanks, Megan.
It's perfect. So everybody said everything perfectly. I would just say apply. My final thought is, this is the perfect time in your life to really rethink who you are. Yale is going to challenge you. It's going to provide avenues for you. It's going to provide you another sense of self-worth. And as I look back on the young Jonathan at the EA telling Maria, no, I'm not going to apply, I will pull that kid aside and let him know that everything's going to be fine. You're in for a lot of work, and just hang in there.
Thank you, guys. I met all of you 2 years ago as well, so it's such a pleasure to see you on the other end of it, nearing graduation. And I thank you so much for sharing your time with us and talking about the exam, talking about admissions, talking about the program so positively. We're out of time. I want to thank our audience for being with us today. It's such a pleasure to talk to you guys. We are here for you if any questions that you have. We hope to see you on campus, and I wish you the best of luck in your EMBA journey. Thanks.